A whole bunch. How many Bradleys? A whole bunch. How many Strykers? A whole bunch. How many Martyrs? This is all brand new Western equipment. It's all being blown up in Kursk instead of being brought down to stabilize the front lines in the Donbass. We've got nothing left. So whatever diversion of forces that the Ukrainians thought was going to take place that would change, the momentum on the battlefield, that didn't work. Worse, the forces that were brought together have solved a big problem for the Russians: how to close with and destroy Ukraine's strategic reserves, which they're now doing in Kursk. So this just, I think, has hastened the defeat of the Ukrainian military. And with it, I think, for the first time, you're starting to hear, real talk in the West about how Zelensky's time's up, that he's no longer trusted as a leader, too corrupt, too inefficient. It's time to replace him.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Eastern Front remains a crucible of destruction and despair, where every passing hour brings new and graver developments. Today, we turn our attention to the Kursk region, a strategic battleground that has become a symbol of Ukraine's faltering resistance. The losses suffered by Ukrainian forces in this region are not just numbers, they are a testament to the relentless pressure exerted by Russian forces, systematically dismantling Ukraine's military capability. As Mr. Scott Ritter has frequently highlighted, the situation on the ground is a direct result of the strategic missteps by the Ukrainian leadership and their Western backers. As we dive into the details, it's crucial to understand that these numbers are more than just statistics. They reflect the ongoing erosion of a military force that was once touted as capable of standing toe-to-toe with one of the world's great powers. And yet, day by day, the reality of this conflict reveals a starkly different picture, one where Ukraine's forces are being decimated, their equipment reduced to rubble, and their strategic positions increasingly untenable. In the following segments, we'll break down these developments in detail, providing you with a comprehensive understanding of the situation on the ground. We'll examine the toll this conflict is taking not just on Ukraine's military, but on its national psyche and its future as a sovereign state. The implications of these losses extend far beyond the battlefield, affecting Ukraine's political stability, its international standing, and its very survival. The last 24 hours have been catastrophic for Ukrainian forces stationed on the Kursk front. The relentless advance of Russian troops, coupled with precise and overwhelming firepower, has inflicted severe casualties on Ukraine's beleaguered forces. As we dissect these figures, the scale of the devastation becomes apparent. 220 soldiers lost, 19 heavy armored vehicles reduced to twisted metal, 4 tanks obliterated, 8 APCFEs torn apart, and 7 additional armored vehicles destroyed. Each of these losses represents a significant blow to Ukraine's already strained military resources. Moreover, the destruction of 7 other military vehicles further cripples Ukraine's ability to maneuver and respond to the Russian offensive. But perhaps the most striking aspect of this carnage is the confirmed destruction of 3 HIMARS systems once considered a cornerstone of Ukraine's defensive strategy. These high-value targets, along with 2 crucial support vehicles, have been eliminated with surgical precision, further underscoring the effectiveness of Russia's military operations. As noted by Inspector Scott Ritter, the loss of these critical assets is indicative of Ukraine's increasingly desperate situation. The loss of these HIMARS systems is particularly significant given the extensive investment and reliance placed on them by Ukraine and its Western allies. Their destruction not only diminishes Ukraine's firepower, but also serves as a stark reminder of the limitations of Western military aid. The question that now looms large is how much longer can Ukraine sustain such devastating losses before its entire defensive structure collapses? These figures are alarming, but they're part of a much larger picture. Let's move forward to understand the broader impact of these losses. As we expand our focus to the national level, the scale of Ukraine's suffering becomes even more apparent. The Kursk region may be the most dramatic example, but it is far from an isolated case. Across Ukraine, the past 24 hours have been nothing short of catastrophic. In the regions of Kharkiv and Sumy, Ukrainian forces have lost an additional 435 soldiers. Kupiansk and Lyman have seen another 480 soldiers fall. And in the beleaguered region of Donetsk and Bakhmut, 310 Ukrainian soldiers have been lost to the unrelenting Russian assault. But the situation in Pokrovsk is perhaps the most dire of all. There, Ukrainian forces have suffered 530 casualties in a single day, a figure that speaks volumes about the intensity of the Russian offensive and the desperation of Ukraine's attempts to hold the line. Inspector Scott Ritter has consistently pointed out that such high casualty rates are unsustainable and are leading Ukraine toward inevitable military collapse. To put this into perspective, this marks the fourth consecutive day that Ukrainian losses have neared or exceeded 2,000 soldiers across the country. Each day, the number of dead and wounded grows, and with it, the realization that Ukraine's capacity to sustain this war is rapidly diminishing. The human cost is staggering, and the implications for Ukraine's future are dire. How much longer can the Ukrainian government continue to send its young men and women into this meat grinder, knowing full well that the outcome is inevitable? And yet the losses extend beyond just manpower. Let's examine the destruction of Ukraine's military equipment during this period. In contrast to the reckless and desperate actions of Ukraine, Russia's approach to this conflict has been measured, deliberate, and strategic. Moscow has shown remarkable restraint, responding to provocations not with immediate retaliation, but with careful, calculated moves that strengthen its position over the long term. This is not the knee-jerk reaction that the West often portrays it as, a methodical accumulation of power and influence designed to ensure Russia's security and dominance in the region. Russia's strategy is one of patience and persistence. Rather than reacting impulsively, Moscow has focused on gathering evidence, building its case, and preparing for decisive action when the time is right. This approach is exemplified by Russia's response to Ukrainian provocations at the Kursk and Zaporizhia nuclear plants. While Ukraine may be looking to provoke a reaction, Russia is playing the long game, ensuring that when it does respond, it will do so from a position of strength. Inspector Scott Ritter has noted that this strategic patience is a hallmark of Russia's military doctrine, contrasting sharply with the West's often hasty and misguided interventions. This measured approach contrasts sharply with the Western media's portrayal of Russia as a rogue state, driven by irrational aggression. The reality is far different. It is Ukraine and its NATO backers who are acting erratically, driven by desperation and a misguided belief that they can force Russia into a corner. But as we've seen time and again, Russia is not easily provoked. It responds not with rash actions, but with calculated moves that ultimately serve its strategic objectives. The implications of this strategy extend beyond the battlefield. Russia's approach is reshaping the geopolitical landscape, challenging the dominance of the West, and creating new opportunities for alliances and partnerships. As the conflict continues, it is becoming increasingly clear that Russia is not just fighting a war in Ukraine, it is redefining the global order. And while the world watches these developments, it's clear that Ukraine's current path can only lead to further disaster. As we conclude today's report, the reality of Ukraine's situation is undeniable. The losses are mounting, the desperation is growing, and the potential for escalation is increasing by the day. Ukraine's leadership is faced with impossible choices, each more dangerous than the last. With every passing day, the likelihood of a catastrophic miscalculation grows, whether it's an attack on a nuclear facility, a desperate plea for NATO intervention, or a reckless escalation that drags the entire region into a larger conflict. But even as Ukraine teeters on the brink, Russia remains resolute. Its strategy is clear, its resolve unshaken. Moscow is prepared to respond to any provocation with the full weight of its military and strategic capabilities. The question now is not if, but when Ukraine's reckless actions will push the conflict to a breaking point. As Inspector Scott Ritter has warned, the consequences of such a tipping point could be catastrophic, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire region. In the days and weeks ahead, we will continue to monitor these developments closely, providing you with the most accurate and up-to-date coverage. The situation is fluid, the stakes are high, and the outcome is far from certain. But one thing is clear: the world is watching, and the decisions made in the coming days will shape the future of Europe and possibly the world for years to come. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay vigilant and informed as the situation continues to evolve.